Hello there and welcome back to the studio today. In today's video, we got something really exciting going on. So we're going to finally begin work on this large canvas that we toned a couple days ago. Remember, we toned it with oil paint, and over the past few days we've done a couple studies preparing us for this painting. So we're going to start off with charcoal. This is just Nitram charcoal and a chamois to erase. And here we have an image of our model Steve, and this is going to be the photo reference that I'm going to use probably for the majority of this painting. So I'm going to keep an image of him to the top left corner of your screen, but since this is a larger painting, the camera is going to have to be on the side just so I don't block all of the footage and lose the footage like I did a couple days ago, so that wouldn't be good. So I'm going to keep an image on the top left corner of your screen. Just know that the image is going to be a little bit smaller than what you're normally used to, just so that I can show the actual canvas that I'm working on. Now, I did say that the pose could change a little bit from when we did the, oh, you know what's exciting? That's the first mark for this painting. So if this painting ends up being my greatest work ever, you have now witnessed the first mark. Anyway, back on topic. So I did say that the pose could potentially change from when we did the technical drawing to the next pose from life. So again, I do have to apologize for the video, or the way the video was created yesterday. I filmed with my art group, and I did the best I could to obtain usable footage for a more instructional type of video, kind of like what I'm doing now. But the footage just didn't really work out, and again, I'm sorry about that. So I took that opportunity to create a type of art talk. So anyway, what's going on today is I'm working with charcoal, just because charcoal is much easier to erase. And if I get to it later on today, I will go over the lines with oil paint. So essentially, I'm going to be using the composition that I came up with, or that we came up with in the technical drawing. So remember, it was important in the technical drawing to place the head somewhere in the 3/4 vicinity of this canvas, and a little close to the top of the canvas, but not really as close. If the head was up here, then it'd probably be kind of uncomfortable. Another thing I need to address is that I'm not using a grid system. So I said in the technical drawing, I wasn't really sure how I would transfer those lines onto this larger canvas. So I did suggest the idea of using a grid system, but I don't really want this painting to have a kind of different process than my other ones. So I don't really want to use a gridding system just yet. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using a grid system. It's just that, I don't know, I just personally don't want to do that for this painting. It's really just up to a matter of feel, really. So I'm using the composition that we established in the technical drawing. I did say in the technical drawing that the arm, in particular his right arm, would potentially change, and it did. I did change that. So again, today is going to be kind of another one of those days where you need a nice cup of tea, and sit back and relax. Again, the large proportions are going to be kind of difficult to establish without a preliminary technical drawing. So I'm going to keep referring to my technical drawing. I have it on the side, off camera, so I can continue to refer to it as opposed to just merely using the photo reference. So another thing that did change is the angle of his head. So I actually have him leaning more towards the still life objects. So I'm going to just go ahead and make that change. And don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with all of the footage involved in this drawing. Now I'm trying to be rather light with my mark making, and I know the camera is on an angle, so you can't actually see from my perspective exactly what's going on. But I'm trying to make my marks rather light because I'm going to be erasing probably thousands of times. And I'm sure some of you are going to say, well, why don't you just grid the picture? Why don't you just trace it? And again, I don't want to do that. It's personal preference, really. It's just down to personal preference. So right now, what I'm trying to figure out is where I want his head placed. Now that technical drawing is incredibly useful for me right now because I'm looking at the negative space here, and I'm just trying to abstract what I'm looking at in my technical drawing and in the photo reference. So I have them both available to me. So the book, and like I said before, we did change the book. So this book is more of an atlas kind of thing, a map of the world. Since the narrative of this painting is an explorer, our model Steve is posing for us as an explorer. So let's see here, corner for the chair. I'm aware that the perspective of this large canvas, like I mentioned in the technical drawing, would be kind of an issue working with such a large canvas. But I'm just going to go ahead and take a risk here and draw it without the aid of a grid system. I had to think a lot about this particular video, the first marks that I would make on this. I did a lot of thinking in terms of how I wanted to start this painting. Alright, so something that was added to this composition is obviously the still life elements, but we also have a little element of this little fabric, here. That the reason I put the fabric there was to cover a bunch of stuff that was in the background, but I ended up liking this little rectangle that's cropping the main figure. I just thought that was pretty neat. And now the goal is to use simple straight lines and angles, relating points to one another, not worried about any detail at all. Just thinking about the large overall placement of all of these things. So the globe is going to fit a little bit below his head, just like I had predicted in the first study that we made for this painting. Now I'm not too worried about drawing a perfect sphere right now. I'm more or less just trying to figure out the size of this sphere. So I think that globe is a little bit bigger. So the globe actually goes right in front of the book. So again, there's going to be a lot of stuff that I'm going to have to work out today. Today is definitely going to be a long day for me. Not as long for you. Trying to bring the experience of what it's like to be in the studio working creating works of art every single day. But I'm not going to present you the hours and hours it's going to take me for this drawing. And that's just for the sake of storage on my computer, basically. The battery life of my cameras. Hope I'm not being too honest. So his hand probably fits about there. His left hand is about there. His right hand is about here. His leg is going to fit somewhere about down here. Even the position of his leg is going to be a little bit different. The arm, corner of the arm there. And again, this point, this distance here, and the leg going off down here, those are going to be very important elements of this composition. Another thing that changed is the table. I decided, so in the original analytical drawing, the table is going off the side there. So I'm actually cropping it right here. So I've decided to crop a very tiny little portion here for the table. And by crop, I mean putting just, I'm actually bringing the corner of the table into the composition as opposed to pushing it out. So I guess cropping isn't the right word. Just like we have this little distance here, we're going to have a tiny little distance here for the table. And you know what? I should probably move it further that way. Alright, so I'm going to work on this linear block in for quite a while. And at this point, I'm just thinking about the outside shapes. Now that I have these larger shapes in position, I'm just thinking about the simple shapes. And I think that working in this way is a little more honest, a little more faithful to how I usually work, the way that you've seen me start my portrait painting tutorials. So I don't want to break away too much from the information that I've presented to you. So just like we do with the simpler portrait painting tutorials and stuff that I've presented to you in the past, I'm just looking at simple shape, and the same rules apply. I know that I've made videos titled Breaking the Rules and things like that, but the same kind of stuff applies here. Keep your shapes simple and easy for you to understand, and of course, hopefully some of you can finish my sentence. If you can finish my sentence before I say what I'm going to say, please comment down below. I would love to hear that. But in any case, keep your shape simple and easy for you to understand, so that when the time comes to make changes, those changes are simple and easy to manage. And that is going to be extremely important for today. It's gonna go, that shape's gonna go out here a little more. Possibly a little further. Relating each position of the composition to the surrounding shapes, so relating this shape to this shape to this shape, and etc. And notice how much I'm standing back. Hopefully you can see it in the video. I'm standing back quite a bit. Each time I make a mark, I stand back. Especially with a larger painting. So I'm going to be quite cautious of the length of the radius and ulna, this bone here. Very, very, very cautious about that distance there, because I think in the photograph it could potentially distort it. So I'm just going to be kind of mindful of that. Another thing I should probably talk about, I should have talked about this sooner, is that I'm going to do my best to bring this canvas over to my art group and work from life. I'm going to be taking each little segment at a time. For instance, I'll probably work on the portrait for a couple sittings and then move on to the hands, still life elements, and all of that stuff. But I really don't want to elongate the radius ulna area of the arm. I think I messed that up on my larger painting. Not the larger one, the smaller one. The previous one that I did, the one I did of our model Christine, I wasn't too happy about the proportions on that one. And I think another thing that went wrong with that painting is I overthought it. I was thinking way too much about how each video would be presented, and I wasn't really exploring the canvas, or I guess the panel, as much as I should have. So for instance, I think I did make it too long. So if I did, it's okay. Just like I said, keep your shapes simple and easy. Simple and easy. That's a much more believable distance now from the elbow to the wrist. And we're probably going to be working on this one for a long time. I have Steve posing for my group for another 4 weeks. Remember, this was a 6-week pose, and I took 2 of those weeks to get prepared for this. So I'm going to do the best that I can to bring this canvas over there, but I'm going to have to be very cautious about my camera angles, because yeah, that didn't work out yesterday. Now, I'm starting to feel like I should probably put in some stuff for the book, or for the books. A little shape here. Just a simple mark for that right now. I'm going to be talking to you in voiceover style now. So what you're seeing is me completely focused on this drawing. This drawing is probably the most difficult drawing that I've ever done. And I'm being honest, I'm being serious. This has to be the most difficult drawing that I've ever tried to do. And that is because of not just the scale of the drawing, but the number of elements in this composition. Notice how I kind of move a little bit strange when I'm drawing and completely focused. I stand back and forth quite a bit. My studio is honestly not large enough for me to stand back adequately. I kept crashing into a chair in the background and stuff, and then eventually crashing into my camera. But I changed the camera angle, so now you can see with a little more clarity that I'm starting to block in some of the shapes for the features of the face. And you saw between one shot and the other, I kind of erased a little portion of the jaw, or sorry, of the beard. So I keep moving my hand back and forth, creating these little gestures uh, to kind of feel out the drawing as well. But now that I'm looking at the footage, something that I noticed before is now kind of justified to me. I felt like the photo reference had kind of distorted the image by widening it. And so what you're seeing now is me being faithful to the photo reference and drawing it exactly as I see it. So in this version of the drawing, it's going to be a little bit wider, but then after however many hours it took me to draw this, I end up elongating the drawing. So right now it's still fairly compressed, so it's fairly wide. So I'm just drawing in a few little shapes here and there for the beard and some of the shapes for the face. And then eventually I realize that the picture is becoming too wide. So I elongate the shapes a little bit. So again, this really takes quite a bit of focus and time. And I know some of you may want to just do I don't know, tracing a picture or something like that, which is perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. But I just personally wanted to just draw it. I wanted to feel the drawing out and really put all of my efforts and all of myself into the development of each and every one of these shapes. And again, I really think that this was the stage that went wrong for me. In the last painting, I had several proportion problems and compositional problems in the last painting. So that's why, again, I'm talking to you in voiceover style, because there was a lot of stuff going on in my mind at this point in time in the creation of this painting. And it would just be way too much for me to try to explain what I'm doing as I'm doing it at the same time, because a lot of what's going on here is almost impossible to describe. It's a lot of course, it's seeing and relating shapes, putting things in, erasing them, taking them out. But a lot of it is felt. There's a lot of feeling that goes into each and every one of these marks that I'm making, until eventually figuring out where each shape needs to fit. Now the nose and the features I probably moved around maybe 50 or 60 times. Now you can see how the chamois, maybe if you just saw in the last shot, the chamois is almost completely dark now. So now you can see the chamois. That was a new chamois, so I pretty much wore out the charcoal and the chamois creating this drawing. But again, it's really about being honest with yourself in the way that you enjoy working. Now, after spending quite a long time trying to draw these simple shapes and sacrificing one thing of Nitram charcoal and pretty much wearing out a brand new chamois, I think that I have the simple block in and composition that I want. I did some changes. So for instance, I kind of made him a little bit longer and a little bit thinner. I feel like the photograph kind of widens the perspective a little bit. So again, it's a good thing that I'm working both from life and from photo reference for this painting. So I also moved his head a little bit higher up, and this is about the furthest I would want his head to move up. I think this is kind of pushing the limit of how high I want to move his head. And compositionally, I think it just works out a little better, because when we take a look at the main diagonal, this is the main diagonal. Remember we talked about this in the analytical, what did we call it? The technical drawing. When you look at the main diagonal, his head is pretty much right on top of the main diagonal. His head is also in a 3/4 position. And another interesting thing It's not exactly there, but his hand, the finger that's pointing, is actually very close to the center of this entire composition, which I actually like. I might even push his finger a little bit higher up than the photo reference has, just so it's exactly in the middle, just so you can kind of add, I can kind of add some emphasis to whatever part of this book that he's pointing towards. Another thing I've changed is I'm leaning the drapery towards him. So I'm letting this line basically move a little more in this direction, and I might even put some more little shapes here for the fabric in this area, and keep this rather quiet. So this is going to be kind of the quiet space of the composition, and on the main diagonal is where all of the stuff is going to happen. We have the books, the binoculars that I didn't really finish yet, but simple shape is good enough, and the globe. So all of this stuff is going to kind of happen on this main diagonal. The next thing we want to do to further solidify the drawing, or at least the lines on the drawing, is we're going to combine our burnt umber, so quite a bit of burnt umber, with a little bit of Liquin medium. You can use whichever fast dryer you'd like. Not really going to use that much, just a tiny, yeah, just a tiny bit of Liquin. And your mineral spirits, or whatever brush cleaner you're going to use. This is the Citrus Essence brush cleaner. And again, I just like to use it because I feel like it helps the paint dry a little bit faster. And I'm using one of my older palettes. It's a little bit larger, and it's kind of like rugged looking. So I don't know. I just thought it would be neat to bring out this older palette. So just a little bit of brush cleaner and the Liquin, and we have a nice consistency here to go over the outlines. And I'm using a pretty much a size 1 or 2 round brush. It's a synthetic bristle mix. So let's start off with this side. So very clean, doesn't have to be super sharp line. So let's follow around the outside first. Now, it doesn't have to be completely perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect photographic rendition of the model, as I always say. This is mainly just to solidify the simple shape. And notice with the eyes, I'm not even going to do anything more than just simple little brush stroke. Don't want to overdo it. Now the eyebrows are going to be very nice characteristic of our model, so let's go ahead and put them in. Now the nose, I might have elongated that a little too much. Push that shape in, goes down. I think that's about all right. Seeing a little tiny bit of the outside here. This is one of the very few times I would say it's pretty useful to have a very steady hand. But if the lines get a little bit If you miss your mark somewhere, it's not going to be a big deal. So for the mouth, let's put in a little more of an exacting shape than we had before. Something simple as that. Now for the ear, let's go ahead and block in this shape here. Earlobe, anti-helix, or actually I think that's the helix, that's the anti-helix. Tragus for the ear. So that was a very crucial part of this stage. So the rest we can handle very similarly. We don't have to be as cautious with the rest until we get down to, I guess, the hands, really. And so again, following each and every one of these little contours with the combination of the burnt umber, the brush cleaner, and the liquin, it's really almost like an ink line, to be honest. I'm just following along each one of these contours, trying to be as faithful as I can to the original shapes that I'm observing on the photo reference, but the reason that I'm putting these marks in right now is so that it dries by tomorrow, and so tomorrow I'll be able to continue the development of each and every one of the shapes, specifically the patterns of light and dark. So with these hands, at least with this one, I really did the best that I could to make sure that I didn't shorten the metacarpals too much. So I think that the metacarpals are in just about the right proportion for the hand. Now with the other hand, I actually kind of edit the way the hand looks. So if you look at the photo reference, I actually moved the pointer finger up. So again, it's really not about copying the photo reference. It's about taking in visual information, interpreting it, and creating a painting. And here is the painting at as close to a center as I can possibly get the camera, so that it minimizes the amount of distortion. Now there's still a little bit of distortion if you look at the corner of the rectangle here. I mean, I'm doing the best I can with my camera, but all cameras will kind of distort a little bit, I think. So I did kind of elongate and compress him a little bit. I feel like, you can see my photo reference over there, I feel like the picture that I took kind of widened him a little bit and added a little bit of distortion. So when I was working from life yesterday, I kind of noticed that the whole scene wasn't quite as wide. Now I'm not terribly worried about the sphere just yet. I know that the sphere is kind of not correct yet. That's something I'll be able to figure out later. I might be able to, I don't know, get like a little sphere tool to help me draw a perfect sphere. But in any case, that's going to be about it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be back again soon.